In the hushed aftermath of Mustafar's cataclysm, the world seemed to exhale smoke instead of air. Rivers of molten rock spiraled down obsidian banks, carving paths of scarlet light that pulsed like living veins. Each step across the fractured platforms sent echoes of distant collapse rippling into the fiery chasm below. The once proud engineering marvels of the Separatists lay twisted and half-buried, as though swallowed by the mountain's hungry heart. Amidst this infernal tableau rested a sundered relic, a charred fragment of a once-gleaming starfighter, its gaping hull still glowing with residual heat. Even the Force recoiled from the agony etched into molten stone. Across the galaxy, sensors trembled with readings defying expectation. News networks splashed crimson reports onto holoscreens. "Skywalker perished," they declared, voices hushed as though reciting a sacred liturgy. Senators in Coruscant's high chambers exchanged solemn glances, their debate grayed by the specter of uncertainty. Whispers swirled in cantina dens and opulent corridors alike, rumors of unnatural intervention, of Sith sorcery cleaving destiny itself. Below the political haze, the landscape itself narrated a saga of ruin and renewal. Blackened pillars jutted toward an overcast sky, chromatic embers dancing like restless spirits along their jagged surfaces. Ash drifted through roiling currents of wind, settling into furrows etched by glowing runoff. Within that fine dust lay faint impressions of warriors felled in the final duel. A charred glove here, a shattered helmet there, each item frozen mid-fall as though time itself had stuttered and then resumed. Yet even in desolation, the Force murmurs possibilities. As the twin suns dipped below an ash-choked horizon, a distant howl of wind carried a vibration unlike any natural gust, a resonance threaded with purpose. Something ancient and fierce stirred in that lament, as if the planet's molten veins pulsed with memory. Where life seemed impossible, embers flared in hidden fissures, tiny eruptions of luminescent heat, reminding all who observed that fire does not solely destroy, but also refines. Amid these dying embers, attention shifted upward to the brooding heavens. Crimson clouds billowed like spilled ink, pierced by sudden arcs of white lightning. Each bolt split the darkness to silhouette the crater's ragged rim in stark contrast. For fleeting instants, observers swore they glimpsed the shadowy outline of a figure, its dual blades unfurled in silent ritual. But when the flashes faded, only smoke and silence remained, inviting questions that hung heavier than ash. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi archives buzzed with fragmented holofeeds from Mustafar's sensors. Obi-Wan Kenobi, burdened by regret, studied the distorted images with furrowed brow. His mind replayed the final moments with excruciating clarity. Brotherly trust turned to bitter betrayal. Could any spark of Anakin's light endure such flames? Guilt clawed at his heart as he pondered whether redemption might yet flicker in that burning waste. Thousands of kilometers away, in a draped sanctum on Dathomir, Darth Maul attuned his senses to the Night Sister ley lines. He detected an unfamiliar disturbance. The echo of destruction mingled with a tremor of loss. His blood-red gaze narrowed as he weighed this anomaly against his driving vendetta. Half of him urged vengeance. The other half discerned strategy, an opportunity to shape power beyond any Sith's ambition. He sensed the tremors of fate reverberating through every molecule, as though the very stones of Dathomir whispered secrets of stars that had long since died. Often, ancient lore spoke of fragile balances, where a single life could tilt the Force toward light or shadow. As shadows deepened across Mustafar's volcanic plains, the world teetered between endings and beginnings. The air hung heavy with ash and anticipation, as though each drifting mote carried within it the question of fate. Would hope emerge from these ember fields, or would despair consume the last breath? Only the silent rock and roiling fire held the answer, offering no comfort beyond their merciless truth. In hidden outposts on distant moons, scryers recorded the tremors of the Force, debating whether Anakin had truly fallen or been reclaimed by shadows. Bounty hunters whispered of a prize lost, mercenaries poised for new contracts. Historians in the Jedi Temple's dusty archives consulted scrolls that spoke of champions reborn from ember and ash. Across star systems, tavern patrons lit candles in solidarity. Traders paused shipments to honor silence. Even within clandestine Sith libraries, logs noted a disturbance rippling through codices of forbidden rites. And so the galaxy held its breath between despair and redemption, and prophecy endured. The stage was set for destinies to collide, but the curtain had yet to rise on the players who would shape this new act. From the glowing fissures of Mustafar, to the marble halls of Coruscant, to the haunted groves of Dathomir, threads of destiny began to intertwine. And as this whispered legend drew to a close, a single ember of thought burned bright. From ruin, a new saga would ignite. At dawn's ashen light, a new shadow moved across the crater. A faint hum, like distant chants echoing in a forgotten temple, signaled that the story was far from over. The next chapter will reveal whose hand extends to shape the fire's legacy. Pale ash clung to the horizon as a lone silhouette emerged on Mustafar's scorched slopes. Embers drifted like phantom sparks, swirling around the figure's horned head and angular frame. Beneath him, rivers of molten metal carved glowing veins into fractured basalt. Broken pillars jutted from the crust, casting twisted shadows. Each step rattled ash from unseen vents, while the sky, thick with smoke, pressed down as if mourning a fallen world. Far away, in Dathomir's twilight halls, Darth Maul had felt a thunderous rupture in the Force. A vision had stormed through his mind. Twin sabers, swallowed by lava's roar. A final cry, lost beneath molten fury. That echo haunted him, driving him across hyperspace. No oracle had commanded this journey, only the Force's insistent whisper, promising that Anakin Skywalker's fate held the power to reshape destinies. His transport lay hidden within a cavern's obsidian throat, its hull scarred by countless clashes yet humming with latent power. Maul stepped onto a narrow brow where sulphurous heat billowed from crevices. A coarse holomap glowed in his palm, sketching fissures and derelict turrets. But he needed no map. The Force guided every footfall. He descended through ash-laden corridors, each inhalation sharpening his resolve. He paused at a collapsed bridge spanning a river of molten alloy. Below, a speeder's warped frame lay fused with scorching rock. A med scanner blinked feebly nearby, its readouts flickering like dying stars. Maul crouched and brushed ash from its lens. The readings confirmed a biosign deep within the crater. Weak, but alive. The Force pulsed with that rhythm, a dying drumbeat in a tomb. Above him, storm clouds churned in bruised crimson, laced with flickers of white lightning. Without hesitation, Maul ignited his dual lightsabers. Twin arcs of red fire hissed to life. He rose and moved forward, blades humming in resonance with the planet's fury. Each stride through the fractured terrain was deliberate, a measured dance between shadow and flame. After crossing jagged outcroppings and steaming vents, Maul reached a crater rim where glowing heat shimmered in waves. There, half buried in ash and slag, lay Anakin Skywalker. His armor was a mosaic of charred plate and torn fabric, flesh scorched in places. Every breath he drew strained against agony, and the med scanner's dull glow marked his fragile survival. A tremor rattled the ledge, flinging hot pebbles into the abyss. Maul deactivated his sabers with a swift motion and knelt beside the Jedi. He slid one gauntleted hand beneath Skywalker's shoulders and pried away molten debris with the other. Lava hissed below as he lifted the inert form, feeling the Jedi's power ebbing through the Force. Each heartbeat traveled up his arm like an ember on the brink of extinction. Engines roared as a battered transport descended through ash-choked air, its landing jets stirring embers into drifting plumes. Maul bore his burden toward the vessel's open hatch, every motion sculpted by the Force's undulating currents. Behind him, twin saber arcs faded into darkness. As he crossed the threshold, the ship's hull sealed against the inferno, and the roar of molten planes gave way to the hum of recycled air. Inside, narrow corridors led to a Spartan medical bay bathed in sterile light. Maul laid Skywalker on a clinical slab, the Jedi's cloak pooling around them like dark water. He retrieved a crystal matrix from his belt, a device tuned to heal grievous wounds, and activated a lone medical droid. Robotic arms descended, their probes glowing as they interfaced with scorched flesh and fractured bone. Memories flickered in Maul's mind. Night Sister chants echoing through shadowed groves, incantations that once fueled his wrath. None had ever called him with such clarity. Now he wielded mercy as a weapon, bending destiny's thread with the precision of a master weaver. Through reinforced portholes, Maul watched ash settle onto the ship's hull. The Force whispered questions he dared not ignore. Had he betrayed his vengeance to embrace something greater? Could this fragile alliance tip the galaxy's scales? He closed his eyes, attuning to the pulse of life beside him, and the thunder of prophecy awoken in molten stone. Silence settled over the medical bay as the droid's rhythmic hum joined the cadence of Anakin's restored heartbeat. Maul stood sentinel, cloak trailing behind him like a shadow given flesh. The Phantom's choice had been made, and the galaxy shivered on the edge of a new dawn. The next chapter will reveal how this unlikely bond sparks fires of rebellion and revenge in worlds beyond these burning fields evermore. As the wounded Skywalker's transport vanished into the ash-choked sky, Obi-Wan Kenobi stood atop Mustafar's jagged rim. Storm clouds hung heavy, teeth of thunder ready to snap. His blue blade remained sheathed, chest tight with remorse. He traced the path where he once felled his ally. Lightning flared overhead, revealing shattered walkways and molten channels snaking through basalt. Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber in a flash of cerulean light. Ash whipped around him, stinging his eyes, yet he advanced. Every step forward rang with the echo of betrayal, every breath weighed by the horror of a brother lost. He halted on a collapsed platform where he had struck his former apprentice. Now, only scorched impressions marked the ground, gouges of saber strikes and smears of ash. Obi-Wan whispered a silent apology as his gloved hand pressed into the charred stone, searching for a fragment of Anakin's light, still imprinted in the rock. A distant roar cleaved the air. Two shapes emerged, the horned silhouette of Darth Maul, and a battered craft bearing Anakin's broken form. Maul stepped onto the smoking basalt, blades unlit, but menace radiating from every line of his posture. Obi-Wan rose to meet him, igniting his saber before words could cross the storm-torn wind. Maul stood unmoved, his dual blades humming awake in response to Obi-Wan's challenge. Sparks danced as electricity from clouds passed between their lightsabers. The rain hammered down in sheets, each drop sizzling where it met molten fragments. They regarded each other in tense silence, two pieces of vengeance drawn together by fate's design. Without warning, Maul lunged with predatory grace, his crimson arcs tracing lethal paths in the gloom. Obi-Wan deflected the first blow, parrying a strike that could have cleaved stone. Then, amidst the roar of thunder, Anakin emerged with his unstable hilt ablaze, an orange beam sputtering erratically, joining the fray as an unpredictable force adding a note to the storm's symphony. Thus, three combatants clashed beneath a storm-riven sky. Maul's dual blades whirled like crimson hurricanes, carving the air with merciless precision. Obi-Wan matched each assault with disciplined defense, his blue saber gleaming with resolute calm. Anakin's erratic beam flickered wildly, each strike fueled by pain and confusion. Sparks erupted in showers of molten light whenever their blades met, sending glowing fragments into swirling smoke. Steam hissed where steel met vapor, and rain hissed where water met flame. Their silhouettes flickered against billowing smoke, movements carved in fleeting arcs of lightning. Every blow carried echoes of history. Obi-Wan's parries bore the sorrow of brotherhood broken. Maul's riposts dripped with vengeance. Anakin's thrusts crackled with raw potential unbound by form. Their dance carved a deadly choreography. 3 points on a spinning axis of light and shadow. Rain pelted their armor, each staccato beat punctuating the crescendo of battle. A sudden flash of lightning revealed Anakin's scarred visage, eyes flashing with pain and power. He faltered, hilt slipping, but instinct guided Obi-Wan's counterstrike, a feint that shifted the storm's tide. Obi-Wan pressed forward, seizing an opening as Maul recoiled from a glancing blow. He swung high, aiming to disarm his former apprentice, but Anakin intercepted with raw desperation. Their sabers locked, blue against orange, the hum a dirge for choices unmade. Obi-Wan's voice cut through the storm. "Anakin, remember who you are. This rage will consume you." The plea resonated amidst thunder, a fragile thread of mercy weaving through the clash of steel and fury. Time seemed to freeze as lightning arced overhead, bathing the trio in stark white light. Maul's gaze flicked between master and student, anticipation gilding his features. Below them, the crater trembled, molten veins pulsing like a wounded heartbeat. Would Anakin yield to Obi-Wan's plea, or succumb to the siren call of vengeance? The next moment would decide more than the outcome of this duel. It would steer the currents of fate rippling across the galaxy. Lightning still trembled in the sky as Obi-Wan's plea faded into the charged air. In that suspended heartbeat, Maul's crimson blades extinguished, and he pivoted toward the battered vessel's hold. Beneath his cloak, he reached for Anakin's inert form, every fiber of his being galvanized by a singular purpose: to wrench the fallen knight from the jaws of death. He moved with uncanny speed, vaulting across a searing brook of lava that hissed beneath broken struts. Charred platforms collapsed in his wake, embers swirling like fallen spirits. Reaching the transport's open ramp, he knelt over Anakin's motionless body. Flickering life signs glowed on the med scanner, an erratic pulse barely clinging to existence. Searing pain lanced through Skywalker's flesh, where molten droplets had scarred muscles beneath torn armor. Maul's gauntleted hand hovered before Anakin's visor. palm calm amid chaos. With one swift motion, he pried away the cracked helm, revealing a face half-veiled in ash and agony. A tendon twitched in the jaw as ragged breath struggled to emerge. Maul's other hand swept beneath the Jedi's shoulders, lifting him as though he weighed no more than a child's doll. Behind them, the platform groaned, edges fracturing under superheated pressure. Lava surged toward their heels, glowing ribbons of destruction seeking to claim another victim. Maul pressed his back against the ramp's side, bracing against collapsing beams. In one fluid arc, he half-dragged, half-carried Anakin up the incline, armor plates scraping against metal girders. The vessel shuddered, engines kicking to life. Sparks rained as systems rebooted, yet the ramp trembled dangerously, its supports buckling under volcanic tremors. Maul planted his boots, roiling ash bubbling beneath. He allowed a moment's grace, aligning Skywalker's limbs, ensuring the Jedi's breathing stabilized against the crystal-tipped med-droid, probing his wounds. Then he heard the first crack of failing metal. A distant shriek of tearing steel joined the planet's roar. He hoisted Anakin higher, gripping him under one arm as he bounded upward 2 steps at a time. The heat licked his cloak's hem, but his resolve burned fiercer. Each footfall sent a spray of molten grit skyward. Obi-Wan's vanished silhouette lingered in Maul's mind, a silent witness to this impossible act of mercy. The Force pulsed at his fingertips, guiding every movement as if unseen hands bolstered his stride. At last, he reached the sealed hatch, fingers finding the release latch in a practiced snap. The door swung inward, a sanctuary against the inferno outside. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered as life support hummed awake. Maul eased Anakin onto a padded bench, blood seeping through torn fabric at his shoulder. The med-droid whirred, its probes bathing the wound in healing nanites. Maul stood back, silhouette rigid in the sterile glow, his dual blades holstered once more. Below, the ramp shattered in a chorus of snapping supports, sending a geyser of lava skyward. The ship shuddered violently as engines burned brighter, struggling to lift off. Outside the viewport, rivers of molten metal claimed the remains of what had been their world's wrath. Yet here, within this fragile cocoon, life flickered onward. Maul's gaze fell on Anakin's face, pale, sweat-beaded, brow furrowed in pain. He extended a gauntleted finger, brushing a rivulet of ash from the Jedi's cheek. That gentle touch spoke more than rivalry ever could, a promise that this fallen hero would have another chance to shape destiny. As the vessel rose above Mustafar's skyline, the roar of escape eclipsed the planet's fury. Embers trailed beneath the hull like glowing comets. Maul stood at the viewport, hand resting on Skywalker's frail form. In that moment, Savior and saved were bound by a singular thread woven by fate. The fires of Mustafar faded behind them, yet their echoes would haunt every system to come. This unlikely salvation had begun, and the galaxy would tremble at its repercussions. Next we venture into bonds forged in darkness where trust and vengeance intertwine. Above Mustafar's smouldering crater, the transport drifted into a copper-hued sky. Streaking starship trails carved luminous arcs across blood-red clouds. Inside the narrow cabin, emergency lamps cast flickering shadows over consoles coated in volcanic ash. The engines groaned, straining to carry an injured Jedi farther from the world that nearly claimed him. Each tremor through the hull reminded them how close death had come. Anakin Skywalker lay strapped in a reinforced cradle. His breathing was shallow, each ragged inhale monitored by the med-droid's probes, stabilizing fractured ribs and cauterizing burns. Pale fingers twitched beneath torn gauntlets, as though the force stirred within him. Maul stood nearby, silhouette rigid. One hand rested on the console railing, the other brushing ash from the viewport. A tense silence stretched between them. Through the viewport, a shattered speeder's hull drifted in a debris field. Its twisted frame and broken struts glittered like wounded constellations. Maul adjusted course to avoid the wreckage as the autopilot whined. He tapped navcom sequences, engaging thrusters that left glowing contrails behind. Those trails stretched out like scars, mapping their path away from death toward an uncertain refuge. A burst of static cut through the hum of life support. Sensor alarms flared. 3 distant engine signatures closed in. Sleek Imperial fighters. Maul exchanged a glance with the unconscious Jedi, wordless counsel passing between them. Their fragile truce trembled beneath the weight of pursuit and desperation. Maul's gauntleted hand hovered near his saber, but he resisted. Violence would shatter their fragile alliance. Instead, he altered the transponder code, cloaking their trail in false echoes. Each passing second felt like a countdown until confrontation. Throughout the cabin, consoles flickered, displaying erratic power surges and warning glyphs in crimson. Geysers of steam hissed from ruptured pipes, filling the air with scorching mist. Maul's breath came slow and deliberate as he monitored systems, routing auxiliary power from non-essential sectors to vital life support. Each diverted watt felt like a gamble. One wrong calibration could plunge them into silent oblivion. Below decks, conduits sparked as aftershocks rattled the hull. Maul led the med droid through dim corridors toward a rear compartment. There, he planned to secure Anakin for hyperspace. The droid's mechanical arms moved with urgent precision, weaving nanites and circuits into scar tissue and tendons. In an observation bay, Maul paused at a viewport. The blood-red sky shimmered with pursuing fighters. Their dark silhouettes advanced like predators closing on wounded prey. He let the Force guide his choice: to outrun, outthink, or strike from shadow. The memory of vengeance flickered, but necessity extinguished it. Preserving this improbable bond became paramount. Anakin's eyelids fluttered as the Force's currents nudged him. Maul knelt beside him, voice clipped. "Stay with me," he whispered, though words felt hollow. He pressed a data crystal into the droid's control port, coordinates for a hidden rendezvous etched into clandestine holomaps. The droid registered the new data and projected a shimmering route marker into the cabin's gloom. The transport lurched as 3 Imperial ships breached ion clouds, their spotlights cutting through cabin gloom. Alarms screamed. Maul slammed a palm on the navigation console, arming the hyperspace array. Engines roared, enveloping the vessel in violet haze as it slipped free of real space. The pursuing ships blinked out of view, swallowed by the void as their echoes faded. In that instant, the uneasy alliance solidified. Savior and saved, bound by fate as they hurtled toward uncertainty. The med droid's soft clicks blended with hyperspace's hum. Maul remained at the helm, silhouette etched by starlight and afterglow. Each pulse of the drive echoed like a heartbeat, shared by 2 souls intertwined by desperation and possibility. As the ship vanished among points of light, the last tether to Mustafar fell away. Amid silent, haunting corridors and humming engines, Maul allowed a single guarded thought. In forging this fragile bond, he may have altered the galaxy's course forever, and fate itself. In the dim glow of emergency sconces, the transport glided toward its hidden refuge, corridors humming with low-frequency vibrations. Servos adjusted life support, and the med droid's beeps filled the air. Maul walked the narrow gangway, cloak trailing, each step measured by purpose rather than mercy. Behind him, Anakin Skywalker stirred in his recumbent cradle, pain etched into every shallow breath. Anakin's eyelids opened to a world tinted green by hollow displays and healing lights. He reached up to his face, fingers brushing cold metal. His helmet, ash-streaked and scorched, lay beside him. He settled the visor against the back of his hand, raising it reverently before donning it. Through its fractured lens, distant suns shimmered in twin arcs, searing his conscience with memory. The roar of lava, his own final, desperate cry. Guilt coiled around his heart like molten wire. Maul watched him from the darkness, face half-veiled by his hood. His vendetta, long nurtured in shadowed alleys and crimson sanctuaries, simmered beneath a veneer of calm. Every thought returned to one obsession: overthrow Palpatine, claim power through Anakin's unleashed potential. Yet in saving this broken knight, Maul had woven a new thread into his tapestry of vengeance. The friction between his fury and this reluctant kindness pressed at his mind like grinding stone. Anakin's voice emerged, hoarse and distant. "Why?" he whispered, each syllable a crack in his armor of denial. "You saved me." The words trembled with guilt and wonder. Maul remained motionless, gaze fixed on the flickering holomap projected above the nearest console. To answer would betray his agenda. Silence served better as both shield and sword. Pain flickered across Skywalker's features as memories surged. Padme's pleading face, the Jedi Council's cold judgment, the moment he had surrendered to darkness. His knuckles whitened on the cradle's rail. "I failed everyone," he continued, voice breaking. "I deserve to die in those flames." Each confession landed like a blow, echoing through the ship's steel spine. Maul turned at last, red eyes glinting beneath horned shadow. "Survival is the first victory," he intoned, voice low and gravelly. "The next lies in purpose." His words cut through the haze of remorse. He stepped closer, lifting a gauntleted hand to brush a rivulet of blood from Anakin's brow. Somehow, the gesture held more weight than 1,000 blades. Across the cabin, hololights danced upon walls pocked with scorch marks. Maul's mirrored visor caught their glow, reflecting distant stars as he studied the fallen knight. Beneath that reflective surface, rage and resolve mingled. He would temper Anakin's anguish into a weapon sharper than any saber. He would bend the boy's destiny to his own design. Anakin met his gaze through the visor's fractured glass. The twin suns of Mustafar still burned in his memory, yet here they glinted as pinpricks of light against Maul's reflection. In that moment, he saw not a savior, but a strategist, an ally as dangerous as any foe. Yet beneath that truth lay a fragile hope, born of shared suffering and desperation. Maul stepped back, the med droid's probes retracting with soft clicks. "Rest now," he ordered. "Gather strength." His tone brooked no argument. As the droid's mechanical arms folded away, Anakin sank into a fitful sleep, haunted by visions of fire and betrayal. Maul stood alone in the silent cabin, visor reflecting the sterile glow of healing lasers and the distant dance of stars. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his promise and the pull of his vendetta. This hollow victory, rescuing the one who had once brought him low, had set in motion currents he could scarcely control. Beyond these walls, the galaxy spun on axes of power and deception, The next act awaited in the marble halls of Coruscant, where those blinded by politics would contend with truths born in fire. In this transient silence, Maul prepared himself. The war for Anakin's soul had only just begun. Far above the fiery scars of Mustafar, the gleaming towers of Coruscant pierced a twilight sky. News of Anakin Skywalker's improbable survival rippled through the Senate's digital feeds, sending shockwaves across halls of polished marble. Holographic portraits of fallen Jedi flickered in memorial displays as senators gathered behind pillars etched with Republic insignia. Murmured debates filled shadowed corridors, each voice weighed by fear and the unspoken question: how had the Chosen One defied death? Within the Grand Senate chamber, delegates assembled in concentric tiers, their robes whispering over polished stone floors. Chancellor Satine Kryze presided from the elevated dais, countenance beneath the domed ceiling. She raised a slender hand, silencing the chamber's hum. "Colleagues," she began, voice steady, "we must address the report from Mustafar's sensor network. It indicates Skywalker's presence cannot be confirmed. Yet transmission logs suggest life signs persisted against all odds." A ripple of astonishment coursed through the assembly. Near the core delegation, Senator Aurel Seclo exchanged a taut glance with his aide. In the Mandalorian enclave beyond, whispers of a rescue mission by an unknown party circulated like wildfire. Some senators clung to protocol, demanding transparent evidence. Others, wary of Palpatine's agenda, suspected manipulation. Holographic projections activated, casting ghostly images of volcanic terrain onto mist-filled air. Behind marble pillars, small clusters of deputies exchanged counsel in hushed tones. Senator Philo rose, leaning close to the Mon Calamari representative. "Is it possible he was retrieved by Sith agents?" he speculated, voice lowered to a hush. The Mon Calamari inclined her head, concern etched into her tentacled features. If so, the implications for the Jedi Order and Republic security are dire. In antechambers, aides scrolled through encrypted holonet threads outlining covert operations linked to Crimson Dawn and Night Sisters. Each fragment of intelligence pointed toward an orchestrated intervention. A corridor away, Jedi Master Adi Gallia stood beneath a stained glass window depicting ancient battles. Her brows furrowed as she studied reports. She sensed a disturbance in the Force, deception woven around truth. Her hand drifted to the lightsaber at her hip, though its presence remained concealed beneath her robes. Within the Jedi Temple's council chamber, Masters Ki Adi Mundi and Plo Koon reviewed dispatches with mounting unease. Obi-Wan's absence weighed on their deliberations. They petitioned temple security for sensor logs, only to face protocol barriers. Concern rippled through the order. Back in the Senate chamber, the vote commenced, to commission an independent inquiry or to defer in the interest of political unity. Opposition leaders pleaded for immediate clarity, arguing that uncertainty bred unrest. Supporters warned that distrust would fracture alliances at a time when Palpatine's influence already crept like tendrils through the Republic's veins. Holographic avatars flickered, senators voting with solemn gestures. The tally would shape policy and public sentiment. Beyond the public gallery, darkened alcoves bore witness to clandestine conversations. A senator loyal to Palpatine smoked an ornamental pipe, exhaling fragrant tendrils that mingled with the chamber's chill. He whispered into a communicator, requesting discreet retrieval of classified files. In response, an operative embedded within the archives began erasing sensor logs linked to Mustafar, ensuring the official record aligned with the narrative of Anakin's demise. As the chamber emptied, Chancellor Satine lingered, eyes fixed on a fragment of a hollow record, showing a crimson blade extinguished over fiery terrain. The image glowed in her palm like a fallen ember. She recalled Kenobi's anguished report and glimpsed the ripples it had sent through the Force. Somewhere, truth and lies danced in an unstable equilibrium. The Republic's stewards had chosen silence over clarity, sacrificing honesty at the altar of stability. Outside, night deepened over Coruscant's spires, neon streaks reflecting on rain-slicked walkways. The city trembled with suppressed speculation. Cantina patrons whispering rumors of Sith sorcery, political operatives maneuvering in shadows. And above it all, the Force held its breath, poised for the moment when hidden truths would surface from the Senate's blind eye. Beneath Coruscant streets, where neon fingers traced every slick pavement, Maul moved through shadowed alleys with silence. Rain glistened on holographic signs, their garish light painting wet surfaces in lurid hues. The air smelled of burnt spice and ozone, as though an unseen storm crackled within the city's underbelly. Neon blazes fractured in rain-slicked pools, kaleidoscopic shards across rusted gratings. The city's pulse throbbed beneath every footstep. Masked figures slipped through the gloom, their breath visible in steamy plumes. Maul's gauntleted hand brushed against the cool wall as he navigated the maze. At the corridor's end, a hidden bazaar of whispered deals offered contraband holocrons and illicit data crystals. Encrypted data chips clicked within shadowed hands, illicit transmissions melding with techno beats and distant engine roars. He approached a stall ringed by masked operators draped in obsidian robes. A Twi'lek vendor extended a gloved hand, offering a data chip embossed with the symbol of a Night Sister coven. Maul's fingers closed over the crystal, its surface humming with encrypted codes. In exchange, he slid a vial of blood-red elixir, distilled from Mustafar's obsidian sands, and a hollow transponder key that would veil the coven's refuge. The Twi'lek's Leku twitched in approval. "Your protege is well protected," she hissed, voice sandpapery. Maul inclined his head, concealment his strongest currency. As they exchanged tokens, a Crimson Dawn lieutenant emerged, mask gleaming. "The Empire grows restless," she warned. "We require assurances your guest will not jeopardize our interests." Maul's whisper held iron. "Your ventures remain secure. A living Jedi is more valuable than a corpse." She inclined her head, satisfied, so long as he stayed out of their way. Elsewhere in the alleys, a hooded fence bartered hollows to cloaked defectors, trading safe passage for secrets. With alliances sealed, Maul departed the bazaar, holocron pulses and data cards stowed in hidden pockets. The rain had eased to mist, neon reflections shimmering like spectral pathways. Each step carried him closer to the docking bay, where Anakin waited, fragile but alive. In the hush of dripping pipes and distant hums, he sensed the gravity of every pact forged. Favors owed, debts amassed, silent oaths bound by necessity. Maul weighed each pact and cipher, mindful that debts in the underworld demanded reciprocity, silence paid in shadows and favors. Reaching the docking bay's entrance, Maul signaled a slim pilot leaning against a freighter hull. The pilot's helmet slid open to reveal a scarred visage and cynical grin. "Ship's fueled," she reported, "but Imperial watch patrols close fast." Maul handed over the data cards. "These routes will mask our departure," he said. She tucked them into her jumpsuit and saluted. "Understood." As they boarded the freighter, Masked operatives melted back into labyrinthine corridors, their whispers swallowed by the city's pulse. Maul guided Anakin to the viewing gallery, where the planet's neon veins stretched below. He watched the Jedi's haze-filled eyes track the glow. Their uneasy bond thrived on these shadows, each alliance cemented by threat and necessity. The freighter's engines hummed softly as it lifted away, weaving through luminescent towers and corrosive air currents. In Maul's mind, the debts forged tonight would echo in future betrayals and unexpected loyalties. He placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder, a silent promise that beneath every whispered transaction, purpose guided their path. Next, the embrace of forbidden lore awaits, summoned by ancient vaults and Sith riddles hidden in Mandalorian ruins. The freighter cleared hyperspace, depositing Maul and Anakin over a barren desert world. In the shuttle's hold, Anakin's thoughts churned with guilt and ambition, wrestling with the legacy of both Jedi and Sith. Each silent moment pressed on him as he braced for Maul's lesson. A journey into lore that had been buried for millennia and never meant for mortal hands. They touched down near a cluster of shattered columns, Mandalorian ruins, half swallowed by ochre dunes. Wind-sculpted arches and fractured helms of ancient warriors lay scattered like skeletal remains. Neon lamplights within the shuttle flickered out, leaving them under a cloudless sky. Maul led the way across wind-swept sands toward jagged stone tablets embedded in the earth. Faint glyphs pulsed along fractured faces, casting red and violet halos on ash-grey rock. Anakin brushed grit from his cloak, stepping closer to the monoliths. The glyphs thrummed under his touch, their patterns carved by hands long gone. A low resonance surged through the ground, stirring his blood. He pressed his palm against a rune and felt a tingle of raw energy. Maul watched in silence, hooded eyes gleaming with intent. Here lay the threshold between knowledge and ruin. A hidden mechanism clicked when Anakin traced the glyph's pattern. The earth trembled as a circular hatch slid open at the tablet's base, revealing moss-dark stairs. Glyph-laced conduits along the walls glowed with muted crimson, guiding their descent. Each step deepened the hum, as if the power itself beckoned them further into ancient secrets. Torchless, they descended into a vaulted chamber. Stone walls bore frescoes of ancient conflicts, whirling blades, robed figures kneeling before crystalline swords, and Sith lords commanding legions of the fallen. Moisture dripped from arched ceilings, pooling in cracked mosaics. The air tasted of age and ozone, ripe with the thrum of latent energy. At the chamber's center, a black obsidian holocron rested on a raised dais, its facets etched with pulsating runes that mirrored the glyphs above. Anakin approached, heart hammering. As he reached for the cube, the hum exploded into a chorus of whispers, echoes of Sith philosophy and forbidden rites. His vision blurred as crimson lightning arcs and spectral duelists flashed before him. Pain lanced through his skull as memories not his own twisted around him. He stumbled backward, grasping at pillars painted with collapsed spires. Maul's gauntleted hand closed on his arm. "Focus," the Sith rasped. "Let only your will endure." Drawing breath, Anakin forced calm, anchoring each thought to a memory of Padmé's smile and the promise of redemption. The torrent receded like a spent storm. When the turbulence subsided, Anakin channeled his newfound clarity into action. He siphoned fragments of power, mastery of lightning's strike, shadow's embrace, and illusions to unravel an enemy's mind. Each whisper imprinted technique and dogma, yet he refused the lure of darker rites channeling rage. He severed those threads, letting residual echoes fade into silence. He lifted the holocron and secured it within his pack, resolve blazing brighter than starlight. Together they ascended the stairs, emerging into the desert twilight. The wind had stilled, and the tablet's glyphs faded to dormant embers. Around them, the ruins stood silent, as guardians of histories and paths yet unwalked. Above the ruins, Anakin gazed at the horizon where skies bled into violet dusk. Power thrummed at his side, a promise shaped by discipline and choice. Maul placed a gauntleted hand on his shoulder, the gesture a pact between mentor and apprentice. In that hush, they tasted possibility and the weight of secrets that would echo through every star system they would touch. After their descent into the Mandalorian catacombs, Maul charted a course to a hidden outpost, a war command bunker that hummed with the quiet promise of rebellion. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they arrived, stepping into the belly of a fortress carved into a moon's basalt heart. Here, amid the secretive shadows of a rebel stronghold, Maul and Anakin found themselves standing at the crossroads of the galaxy's fate. At the break of dawn, the command bunker's war room lay shrouded in the dim glow of flickering holographic displays. The curved walls of the chamber bore the weight of strategic urgency, as digital maps of star systems and imperial sectors spun ceaselessly in the air. The glow of war room readouts flickered in shades of pale blue and crimson, shifting in response to real-time intelligence updates. Each pulse, a rhythmic echo of the galaxy's desperate struggle against Palpatine's tightening grip. Tactical readouts blinked with urgency, showing a galaxy teetering on the edge of destruction. Anakin stood before the displays, his eyes tracing the overlays of hyperspace lanes and convoy routes. He frowned as he observed the tightening grip of the Empire. "His supply lines are strengthening," he murmured, voice low and tinged with concern. "Coruscant's shield generators will be bolstered in hours." The readouts responded immediately, shifting markers from orange to harsh crimson. Imperial reinforcements were coming. Under Maul's silent, calculated gaze, the weight of urgency pressed down on Anakin's chest. His mind raced. Time had slipped away, unheeded, like charred ash scattering in the wind. But there was no turning back now. Maul's gauntleted finger hovered above a volumetric display of starfighter formations. "We cannot confront the Senate directly," he rasped, voice a low growl. "But we can sabotage the engines that fuel his war machine." He tapped a blinking icon, bringing up a hologram of sleek starfighters, rebels, mercenaries, and ex-Jedi zealots, forces awaiting orders in hidden hangars scattered across the outer rim. They would be the key to striking at the heart of the Empire. Together, Maul and Anakin selected a convoy, 2 escort frigates accompanying a massive tanker laden with shield capacitors, destined for Coruscant's orbital platforms. Anakin's heart raced as the convoy was plotted on the map, a symbolic heartbeat of the operation. His voice was steady, but tinged with a quiet resolve. "I will lead the intercept," he declared. A flicker of guilt gnawed at him, but he buried it beneath a veneer of determination. Maul had saved him twice now, and now he had entrusted Anakin with a choice: victory or oblivion. Within minutes, the squadron assembled. Fighters roared to life in the hidden hangars, engines growling as their pilots prepared for the strike. Maul stood at the center of the war table, his form a shadow beneath the cold light. "Fly tight," he instructed, his voice commanding, yet infused with an undercurrent of urgency. "Anakin, your path diverges here. Draw 1 frigate away. I will cripple the tanker's power array. We strike simultaneously." The plan shimmered on the hollow map, twin blue tracers arching across the void of space as Maul's strategy took form. The squadron would emerge from the shadows of hyperspace and strike fast. It was a plan born of precision and calculated risk, and it would test Anakin's growing skills as a warrior and tactician. Moments later, starfighter engines roared in the silence of space, a prelude to the coming chaos. The fleet leapt from slipstream, emerging into a field of stars as black as blood. Maul's forces stalked the convoy like predators in the night, cloaked and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The first contact blip appeared on Anakin's cockpit display, a frigate's signature. He eased into position behind the Imperial escort, taking aim at the stabilizer fins. His heart pounded in his chest, every beat amplified by the Force. "In 3, 2, now," he whispered into the comms. Blaster fire erupted through the vacuum of space, tracers streaking toward their mark. Anakin dove, his fighter streaking through the void like a comet. Ion bolts rained down on the frigate's engine, rupturing conduits and sending flames blooming out of the engine. The escort spun, out of control, leaving the tanker vulnerable to Maul's assault. As alarms blared aboard the tanker, Maul's craft darted forward. His twin sabers ignited in the zero gravity of space, arcs of red light flashing as he breached the tanker's hull. Sparks cascaded from the severed power conduits, sending shockwaves of energy through the vessel. The tanker shuddered and drifted off course, its precious cargo of shield capacitors left to float in the cold darkness of space. Back to back in the vastness of the void, Maul and Anakin held the line, their respective strikes marking the first wave of rebellion. The remaining escort, crippled and vulnerable, retreated to summon reinforcements, leaving the tanker defenseless. Under Maul's unseen command, the squadron weaved through explosions and debris, guiding their wounded prize toward friendly rendezvous points. When the skirmish ended, the war room displays confirmed the success of the mission. Imperial supply lines were disrupted, and critical supplies were captured. Anakin, his flight suit streaked with micrometeoroid dust, returned to the bunker. He stood before Maul, the adrenaline of the battle still surging through his veins. Maul's eyes gleamed with quiet approval as he shut down the final readouts. "We have struck a nerve," Anakin said, his voice steady, tempered by the satisfaction of success. "They will scramble assets to recover. That delay buys us days." Maul inclined his head, a barely perceptible movement that concealed his pride. "Days we will use to ignite rebellion," he promised. His voice softened, and the flickering holographic embers of the map seemed to dance in the dim light, their glow an omen of things to come. As the war room's lights dimmed and the final readouts blinked with promise, Maul and Anakin stood together, a pair bound by a shared purpose. Through commands and calculated risks, two souls, once tied to vengeance, had guided the hidden currents of fate. Rising embers now glowed across the galaxy's vast tapestry, signaling that hope and terror walked hand in hand. The rebellion had begun, and there was no turning back. At the lip of Mustafar's smoldering crater, dawn bled across the horizon in shades of molten crimson. The sky itself seemed to weep embers, each ash-laden plume catching the first light like dying embers reborn. Maul and Anakin Skywalker stood side by side on fractured obsidian ground, twin silhouettes carved against the blood-red sunrise. In that silent hour before conflict, neither spoke. The world's hush was broken only by distant groans of shifting rock and the whisper of their shared breath. Their alliance this dawn defied all odds. Behind them, scars of their passage marked the volcano's rim, charred footprints where Anakin had first awakened to forbidden lore, blackened gouges where Maul had pried secrets from molten stone. Before them, the crater's depths yawned like the maw of some ancient beast, still glowing with residual heat, an unholy testament to the fury they had survived and the fury yet to come. Here, destiny waited, its pendulum hovering between salvation and oblivion. Fissures glowed, reminding them of sacrifice. Anakin's robes billowed in the ashen wind as he traced a fingertip along the ridge of his scorched armor. Memories danced behind his eyes. Padmé's tear-streaked face, Obi-Wan's final plea, the roar of lava swallowing his name. Guilt coiled in his chest like a living thing. Yet beneath that coil burned something else. A spark of defiance tempered by newfound discipline. He turned to Maul, whose horned shadow loomed tall against the swirling dawn. Memories steeled his resolve for what lay ahead. Maul's eyes shone with unspoken promise. His voice, when it came, was low and gravelly, harmonizing with the planet's rumble. This moment demands more than steel and sorcery, Skywalker. It beckons every choice you have made. His words, shaped by ancient vengeance and hard-earned strategy, rippled through the chill air. We stand at a crossroads where every path leads to blood. Decide which road you will walk. His vow echoed against the Empire's iron will. Between them, the Force trembled, neither light nor dark, but a grim tapestry woven from both. Anakin closed his eyes, feeling every heartbeat as a drum summoning the war to come. He recalled the Jedi Code's promise of balance, then tasted the forbidden sweetness of power dwelling within him. His next breath carried the weight of galaxies and the echo of worlds lost to tyranny. Force currents thrummed, binding choice to destiny. The sun climbed higher, igniting swirling ash into a halo of orange and gold. Silhouettes danced across the crater's lip as the heat haze warped the horizon. For a heartbeat, past and future entwined. He saw himself dueling beside Obi-Wan, his blade blue and true, then flickering to red as he embraced a darker fate. He opened his eyes to Maul's steady gaze and felt the resolve harden in his core. Twin blades carved hope from smoky skies. They descended the crater's edge in measured strides, each step ringing with purpose. Below them, a legion of rebel fighters gathered among ash-heaped ruins, faces lit by torchfire and hope. Smugglers, exiled Jedi, disillusioned clones, all looked up, their eyes reflecting the rising suns and the silent silhouettes above. In their midst, seeds of rebellion had sprouted, watered by whispered promises and stolen victories. Each step echoed the price of their pact. At the crater's floor, Anakin turned and addressed the assembled multitude. His voice carried across the vast expanse. Today, we strike at the heart of tyranny. We carry the embers of hope, kindled by fire and sacrifice. Follow me into the darkness, and together we will forge a new dawn. His words ignited a chorus of cheers that echoed against the jagged walls, resonating with the cadence of destiny. Rebels raised weapons, forging unity in silence. Maul watched from the shadows as Anakin stepped forward, leading them into the molten veil. The horizon's glow washed over his horned silhouette, lending it an almost regal bearing. He sheathed his sabers and placed a hand on the fallen knight's shoulder, a gesture of grim camaraderie. The reckoning had begun, and no force in the galaxy could stay the rising tide of change. Rebel hearts beat with renewed purpose at his words. As dawn's blood-red rays spilled over the crater's rim, ripples in the Force began to unfurl far beyond this volcanic crucible. In Coruscant's halls, anxious senators awoke to reports of disabled convoys, each disruption widening cracks in Palpatine's facade of invulnerable authority. Hidden sanctuaries across the mid-rim sparked into action as rebel cells marshaled forces long held in secret. Even Obi-Wan Kenobi, isolated by remorse, felt the tremors and pursued an instinctual trail of ash. On distant moons, bounty hunters re-evaluated contracts, sensing opportunity in chaos. Far beneath Coruscant, in the Emperor's sanctum, a flicker of unease crossed Palpatine's gaze, a rare admission of miscalculation. For the choices made at this crater's edge would echo through every star system, seeding either liberation or ruin, and fragile hope. Maul's mind turned to trials still unwritten. As embers fade and new shadows rise, alliances will fracture and destinies collide. In the aftermath of Mustafar's Crimson Dawn, Maul led Anakin to a hidden Sith retreat, carved deep into the core of an uncharted asteroid. The temple stood in solemn silence, ancient pillars towering like sentinels from the obsidian floor, their surfaces etched with intricate runes. A faint hum resonated through the air, the swirling force currents reverberating in the stone walls, as though the spirits of those long past still whispered their power into the very structure of this sanctum. The echoes of ancient rituals seemed to pulse with life here, waiting for the right hands to unlock them. Anakin's footsteps echoed beneath the high arches as he followed Maul deeper into the heart of the refuge. The air was cool, scented with incense distilled from rare nether spices that lingered in the stillness. Shafts of pale, diffused light pierced through latticed windows, illuminating motes of dust that drifted like spectral dancers through the air. The shadows were long, and the temple felt alive with history, every pillar bearing the scars of battles, conquests, and blood-stained rituals that had transpired in its depths over the centuries. As they entered a chamber dominated by towering stone columns, Maul paused before a particularly ornate pillar, its surface adorned with delicate glyphs. His eyes, glinting with purpose, turned to Anakin. "Here we begin," he intoned, his voice low and gravely resonant, vibrating through the air like a distant thunderclap. With a single, deliberate motion, Maul extended his gauntleted hand, palm upward, a gesture of both instruction and invitation. "Focus on my palm. Feel the currents of the Force twisting there, dark and light intertwined. Find the balance." Anakin closed his eyes, exhaling slowly as he reached out, extending his own senses. The space before him shimmered with unseen energy, and as he concentrated, the swirling aura above Maul's hand began to flicker. Blue and red hues twisted together, dancing like living smoke in the air, each strand of energy pulling at the very fibers of his being. He could feel the dark and the light, different yet entwined, pushing and pulling, a constant tug-of-war within him. For hours, Maul guided Anakin in the first lesson, balance. He taught him meditative stances that combined the serene, calming presence of the Jedi with the intense, volatile nature of the Sith. It was not an easy feat. Anakin could feel the tension build in every muscle, the need to surrender to either the light or the dark, calling out to him like twin voices. But here, Maul demanded he find harmony between the two, to center himself, to harness both, not to be ruled by one alone. They stood on platforms ringed by towering stones, their aura shimmering in the open space. Anakin's body trembled with the strain, yet the power surged through him in a way that was almost intoxicating. His robes fluttered, charged by the energies surrounding them. He was neither Jedi nor Sith. He was something in between, something more. When stillness gave way to movement, Maul wielded his dual-bladed lightsaber with deadly precision. The blades hummed through the air, each strike purposeful and fluid, an elegant dance of aggression. Sparks flew with each motion, the intense clash of lightsaber against air creating a cascade of light that briefly illuminated the chamber. The combination of fluid grace and seething power filled the space with energy. Anakin struggled at first to match Maul's technique, his own unstable saber hilt flickering and wavering as it hummed to life. But slowly, carefully, he began to find his rhythm. Each swing, each strike became more controlled, less uncertain. The connection between him and the weapon began to feel more natural, more attuned to his will. It was as if the saber became an extension of his body, his movements growing steadier with each repetition. The hours passed, the moon rising higher in the sky, its cold light spilling across the temple. The duo emerged onto a moonlit terrace where Maul issued his next challenge, sparring with a cortical simulator hidden beneath holographic cloaks. The opponent was not a real being, but a projection, designed to mimic both Jedi and Sith combatants. The simulated enemies came at Anakin in waves, attacking with the deadly precision of a trained warrior. Each clash tested his ability to integrate the lessons learned, striking with the fury of the Sith while maintaining the control of the Jedi. Between trials, Maul imparted more fragments of forbidden Sith knowledge. He read aloud from a blood-red codex, scribed in an ancient, half-forgotten tongue. These were secrets of the dark side, rituals that could manipulate the very essence of the Force, bending it to one's will in ways that the Jedi had never even considered. Anakin drank in every word, feeling the weight of the knowledge settle deep within him. Each revelation stirred something inside of him: anger, desire, a hunger to understand the true potential of the Force. He knew the path he walked was dangerous, and yet each secret revealed a new power, a new possibility. He was torn between the temptation to embrace this newfound strength and the nagging remnants of his past, the Jedi teachings that still clung to him. But with each new lesson, his resolve grew stronger, and the darkness became less a thing to fear and more a thing to embrace. The night wore on, and they gathered in the central crypt beneath the great dome that held the relics of the Sith, a collection of ancient artifacts from long-dead masters. Maul guided Anakin through a rite, an austere vow of sorts, to wield this knowledge with purpose, not passion, to allow the twin lights, darkness and light, to become one in his soul. It was a final affirmation of Anakin's commitment to the path Maul had set him on. The candles flickered as they completed the ritual, casting shadows that seemed to dance along the columns, swirling in the air like spirits. As the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, Maul and Anakin stood atop the temple, gazing out into the vastness of space. The stars glittered beyond them, a boundless canvas for their ambition. Anakin's eyes glinted with a new, hardened determination, his stance now tempered by the discipline that had been instilled in him. Maul's pride was hidden behind his stoic exterior, but he placed a firm hand on Anakin's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged in the depths of darkness. Their combined strength, tempered by shared struggle, would soon be tested in ways they could never foresee. Together, they were united by fate and power. From the quiet sanctum of Sith pillars, the path led Maul and Anakin across star routes to Corellia's undercity, where the Empire's shadow pressed tight upon the streets. In this sprawling maze of crumbling infrastructure, the air was thick with the weight of imperial oppression. the low hum of engine maintenance blended with whispered deals and wary glances. Here, in the belly of the city, the flickering screens of smugglers' data pads told stories of rebellion. The tiny, fleeting sparks of resistance against the iron-clad empire. The underground den where Maul and Anakin arrived was a microcosm of the world beyond. A dark, crowded space filled with seedy figures, their faces obscured by the dim light of flickering lanterns. Pools of amber light slashed across rough-hewn tables, revealing faded tattoos, the glint of hidden weapons, and the tension that hummed beneath every surface. The smell of oil, brine, and recycled breath filled the air as crates stamped with trade emblems sagged against walls, weighed down by secrets and contraband. Patrons huddled around hollow projectors, negotiating cargo routes, fake identifications, and forged documents. Their voices, a cacophony of low murmurs and hushed exchanges, were thick with the secrets of the galaxy's underbelly. Maul's cloak swept across the threshold as he led Anakin through the crowd, his presence a cold, calculating force that parted the gathered smugglers like water. They moved toward a back alcove where a lone figure sat hunched over a datapad. Her eyes flicked up when they arrived, skeptical but not afraid, hardened by the harshness of the galaxy and the losses she'd endured. "You have the credentials," she rasped, her voice gravelly from years of swallowing dust and disappointment. Maul wasted no time in producing a synthesized permit and a coded holocron fragment, both marked with the telltale Crimson Dawn insignia. The woman's pale fingers danced across the datapad, decrypting layers of encryption faster than Anakin could blink. Lines of text blossomed across the screen, schedules of garrison rotations, patrol vectors, and supply convoys destined for Coruscant's orbital stations. Anakin felt his pulse quicken as the information flowed. This was more than just another mission. It was a tangible crack in the Empire's facade. Each fragment they gathered chipped away at the walls that the Emperor had so carefully constructed. As Maul stood by with an air of detached command, a pair of stormtroopers marched past the entrance. Their clanking footsteps echoed through the den, their presence a stark reminder of the Empire's reach. The rebel contact stiffened, eyes narrowing in caution, but Maul did not flinch. He stood still, exuding an aura of both patience and command. His calm was a shield, and he knew that the stormtroopers, like the rest of the galaxy, were blind to the intricacies of resistance unfolding under their noses. The contact tapped a final sequence on her datapad, then looked up, her eyes flicking to Maul. He inclined his head, giving her permission to transfer the decrypted data onto her device. Anakin could feel the tension in the air, the sharp awareness that even the slightest misstep could trigger a violent escalation. His body was taut, his mind constantly shifting between focus and fear. He remembered Obi-Wan's teachings, vigilance and mercy. The weight of responsibility gnawed at him, the importance of their mission pressing against his chest. Yet amidst this crucible, the Force whispered possibilities. He sensed the spark, the small, fragile flicker of rebellion that could ignite into a blaze. In this moment, the very galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The contact glanced around again, ensuring no one was paying attention, before she tapped a sequence on the datapad that summoned a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. The metal panels slid apart with a hiss, and a coiled data cable and a portable transceiver were revealed. With quick, practiced motions, the contact connected her device to the underground network, uploading the stolen intelligence to waiting rebel cells. A small progress bar crept across the screen, inching its way toward completion. Anakin stood motionless, watching as the final bits of stolen information were transmitted. In the background, the safe houses and hideouts of the Resistance were coming to life, buzzing with preparation. Holospheres spun tactical battle plans across tables, and former traders, disillusioned officers, and smugglers gathered together, their faces set with determination. It was clear. This was the beginning of something bigger. A revolution was stirring, slowly but surely. As the upload finished and the transceiver sealed itself back into the floor, the contact gathered her cloak and rose. She looked at Maul with a mix of respect and caution. "The Syndicate will want recompense," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But the cause outweighs coin." Maul offered a curt nod, acknowledging her words, but saying nothing. Anakin, for the first time in a long while, felt a deep sense of respect for the defiant soul before him. She was one of the many faces of resistance, each one a spark that could light a fire capable of toppling the Empire. It was a feeling that resonated deeply with him. This was a cause worth fighting for. They slipped out of the den as the shadows deepened, moving swiftly through the maze of alleyways and narrow streets. Figures skulked in the corners, their faces obscured by the darkness, as the stormtroopers continued their monotonous patrols. The blaster patrols had swept through earlier, but now it was as if they had never existed. The galaxy, under the guise of Imperial rule, remained a fractured, wounded place. Maul's hand settled briefly on Anakin's shoulder, his grasp a silent reminder of the promise they held, of the power that still simmered within the galaxy's dark heart. As they emerged into the cold night air, Anakin lifted his gaze to the sky. Above them, the Corellian moons shone brightly in the dark. "They have what they need," he said, his voice a low murmur, but resolute in its finality. Maul's hand remained on his shoulder, his voice soft but edged with finality. "And so, the spark spreads," he rasped. "Soon, it will become a wildfire." Under Corellia's restless moons, the galaxy exhaled. In that fleeting moment of quiet, revenge and hope braided together within every covert transmission. A rebellion was born, its first embers now alight in the cold shadows. The rebel spark had ignited, and nothing would ever be the same. The pilot's engines idled as Maul led Anakin down narrow corridors aboard the hidden cruiser. Torches flickered in wall sconces, their flames dancing across ancient murals depicting Sith tragedies and triumphs. A hush settled over the pair, broken only by the echo of footsteps on polished obsidian floors. Here, in the ship's inner sanctum, dark promises awaited. Maul paused before a carved pedestal where a crystalline holocron hovered in a pool of crimson energy. The artifact pulsed like a heartbeat, ripples of malevolent power radiating through the chamber. Each throb resonated with forbidden knowledge, rites of domination, spells to shackle wills, and lore of lightning that could rend flesh and metal alike. "This holocron contains the rites you seek," Maul intoned, voice low and gravelly. "It holds secrets of the earliest Sith, practices never recorded in Jedi archives. But be warned, with each fragment you absorb, a piece of your soul grows more shadowed." Anakin stepped closer, hand trembling as he reached toward the crystal. The crimson glow reflected in his eyes, igniting hunger and doubt in equal measure. Guilt flared at the thought of succumbing to this darkness, yet the lure of power shimmered like starlight in a void. Maul watched, hooded gaze intent. "Place your fingers upon its surface and feel the force bend to your will. Embrace the currents of vengeance and justice as one." Anakin's palm made contact. Electric heat surged upward, coursing through his veins like molten iron. Visions of triumph danced at his temples, lightning unleashed on tyrants, empires brought to knees. Pain seared across his mind as forbidden memories, twisted by centuries of hate, flooded his consciousness. Voices whispered incantations that could amplify his anger 100-fold. He staggered, eyes clenched, nails digging into his palm. A scream of raw energy pulsed through the holocron and into his spine. Maul's hand closed over Anakin's shoulder, anchoring him. "Focus on your purpose, not the lure of the void," he cautioned. "Let your resolve be the blade that cuts through illusion and binds the dark to your command." Breath ragged, Anakin centered on a single thought: protect the helpless. The roaring torrent in his mind dulled as he wrested control of the surge. The holocron's hum softened to a steady thrum, the crimson ripples slowing. "You have tempered your will," Maul observed. "Now draw only on what you require. The rest you must cast aside like ash on the wind." With a silent nod, he gestured toward an alcove containing ritual staves and ebony robes. "We proceed with the rite of atonement and assertion. It binds this power to your essence without consuming it." Anakin donned the robes, feeling their weight press against his armor. In a circle marked by Ankhs and Tisquin runes, Maul led him through chants that wove light and shadow together. With each verse, Anakin's aura glowed in dual hues of blue and red, a swirling testament to his dual nature. Chant complete. The chamber fell silent. Anakin's breath echoed as the final echo of the ritual faded. He opened his eyes, calm and resolute, eyes blazing with disciplined fire. Faint trails of crimson and blue energy lingered along the rune-inscribed circle, marking the boundary of Anakin's triumph. Each step away carried the residue of both redemption and ruin. Crimson energy rippled one last time from the holocron before it dimmed to an ember glow. The temptation had been fierce, but he had prevailed. As they departed the sanctum, the chamber doors sealed behind them. In the corridor's lamplight, Maul and his apprentice walked into uncertain dawn. Returning to the rebels' skyborne fortress after his trial, Anakin followed Maul through humming corridors. The hidden cruiser's command deck was alive with urgency, hollow displays rotating with the latest intel. A discreet message blinked on a console. An Imperial data vault on Corellag held codes to Palpatine's private command net. Maul's scarred face lit by flickering readouts, he approved the infiltration. Trust would be paramount. They would depend on a long-time ally to guide the descent. Moments later, a slender figure emerged from shadow. A covert specialist named Varys, her face half-veiled beneath a grey scarf. She had fought at Mustafar's rim, saved lives in scattered skirmishes, and earned Maul's grudging respect. Now she offered her expertise in slipping past Imperial sensors, her fingers dancing across datapad screens as she uploaded decryption keys. Anakin sensed her loyalty deep as the Force, yet a tremor of doubt flickered through his gut. They departed in 2 starfighters, slicing through atmosphere toward Corellag's fractured surface. Touching down near a ruined transit hub, the trio advanced past collapsed corridors, the silence broken only by distant drip of coolant and the hiss of activated servos. At a junction, Varys knelt to inspect a scorched comm unit, its wiring severed and sparking. Staccato blaster bolts suddenly raked the corridor ahead, red beams slicing across the dimly lit walls. "Imperial squad," Varys whispered, rising with practiced calm. She tapped the datapad, but the screen went dark. Dead. In that heartbeat, she spun toward Anakin, eyes gleaming with regret and resolve as she leveled a blaster at his chest. "Orders from the Emperor," she murmured, voice brittle. "Palpatine demands your capture." Lightning of betrayal coursed through Anakin's veins as Maul ignited twin sabers in reflex. Blaster fire rattled loose with staccato fury, panels shattering as Maul swept arcs of crimson light to deflect bolts. Anakin ducked behind debris, heart hammering. He had believed in Varys's cause, had fought beside her. Now she stood weaponized by deception. He leapt forward, lightsaber thrusting to disable her blaster arm, sparks erupting as metal bent under his will. Varys staggered, dropping the weapon. "I'm sorry," she gasped, blood blooming at her wrist. "I had no choice." Maul's blade cut swiftly, severing reactivated turbolaser emitters mounted on the wall. The blast door ahead sighed open, revealing a railed shaft. Without a word, he grabbed Varys's arm and hurled her aside, then thrust Anakin toward the exit. They fled through the corridor, alarms clattering in pursuit. Imperial troops poured in from side passages, but the apprentice and the mentor fought back to back, their blades forging a path through staccato salvos. Shadows and red light intertwined as they reached their fighters. With a final thrust of resolve, they blasted free, the corridor collapsing behind them under blasted siege. Safe within the cockpit, Anakin stared at the ruin of the comm unit, now silent and broken. "She was one of us," he rasped. Maul's voice was a low growl. "Trust is a blade as double-edged as any saber." Anakin nodded, blinking back grief and fury. The betrayal had cut deep, but their mission endured. As the fighters punched toward the heavens, the fortress's holoscreens displayed one grim truth. The Empire's reach would now be absolute in that sector. Yet from the embers of treachery, Maul and Anakin resolved to strike harder, their bond tempered by betrayal and sharpened by purpose. From this crucible of betrayal, Maul and Anakin would forge a path that no traitor could sever. Always move forward. Smoke rose like coiled serpents above the domes of Sundari. Once a jewel encased in glass, the Mandalorian capital now smoldered under the weight of civil war. Its wide boulevards, carved from stone and silence, roared with jetpack thrusters and detonations. Crimson banners of the Shadow Collective rippled from shattered spires, while firelight danced across polished armor, stained in soot and blood. Maul stood at the edge of the shattered throne room atop Widow's Peak, gaze steady beneath Mandalore's twilight sky. Anakin, beside him, tightened his grip on a weathered lightsaber hilt, its new weight familiar, but still unfamiliar in his altered hands. Beneath them, the city spiraled into chaos. Loyalist clans, rallied by Bo-Katan Kryze, surged through the lower levels, their gauntlet blasters flaring in arcs. Above, Maul's Death Watch loyalists and Crimson Dawn mercenaries clashed mid-air in flurries of smoke and sparks. The siege was not just a campaign, it was a crucible. Maul had chosen Mandalore for its symbolism. The world had bent to the rule of the strong before. It would again. Yet this time, its battle would mark more than just territory. This was the first real test of Anakin's transformation. Would he stand as apprentice or equal? Anakin soared across a courtyard lit in flickering reds, trailing fire from his boots. He dove into a melee of jetpack warriors, his blade singing arcs of violet as it clashed against Beskar. Sparks burst, armor cracked, and he spun through the wreckage of a fallen speeder. Behind him, a child screamed, the daughter of a neutral clan caught in the crossfire. He hesitated, and in that pause, a Death Watch fighter landed hard beside him, axe raised. Before the blow could fall, Maul landed with seismic force between them, his twin sabers cutting wide, a blur of crimson fire. The warrior fell. Without a word, Maul looked to Anakin, and Anakin nodded. Hesitation had consequences. There was no innocence in war. The battle turned as dusk deepened. Maul rallied his elite fighters to storm the palace's eastern flank, using the ancient cistern tunnels below. There, under the shattered remains of Sundery's old aqueducts, Maul and Anakin moved like phantoms. Between roars of combat above, whispers of strategy passed between them. They were no longer master and student. They were twin blades of the same dark fire. When they emerged into the under-palace chambers, the resistance was waiting. Bo-Katan herself led them, helmet off, eyes burning. "You've brought him into this," she said, gaze flicking to Anakin. "You're creating another monster." Anakin didn't flinch. "I was already made," he said. "Now I've chosen a side." The duel that followed shattered more than stone. Anakin fought with raw power and rising control, forcing Bo-Katan back with relentless precision. She parried with practiced defiance, but the momentum shifted. The chamber collapsed in thunder as Anakin disarmed her, his blade at her throat. He paused. Maul watched, expression unreadable, and then Anakin turned his blade off. "Let her speak of what we've become," he said. They left her there, bound but alive. Outside, Widow's Peak burned. The palace, once the highest point of Sundery, now cracked and listing, stood as a symbol of their victory. The skies above still flashed with streaks of jetpacks, but the tide had turned. The resistance would scatter. The city, like Anakin, now bore the scars of transformation. Side by side on the shattered balcony, Maul and Anakin overlooked the broken capital. "You spared her," Maul said flatly. "I did. You risk the message we built." "I sent another kind." Maul said nothing. Below them, the fires spread, painting the city in embers. Their war had begun not just in shadows, but now in flame. And though Mandalore had fallen, it was only the first world to kneel. The wind moved like a whisper across the sands of memory. It began with stillness, a heavy silence disturbed only by the moaning gusts of Tatooine's twin dusk. The dry air burned with familiarity, and the sky, split in amber and rust, hung over the boy who had once raced for freedom. Now, a man cloaked in shadow stood among phantom echoes of his former self, haunted not by ghosts of the dead, but by the dreams of the living. Anakin Skywalker's breath caught as the sun-drenched dunes of his childhood shimmered before him. The pod race arena loomed in distant haze, rows of skeletal grandstands twisting like broken ribs, sand reclaiming what time had left behind. No cheering crowds, no engines roaring, only the echo of Sebulba's laughter and the high whine of a turbine engine. Just memory, always memory. His eyes drifted upward. The twin suns hung low, one brighter than the other, their glow reflected on his sweat-lined brow, a trick of the mind, perhaps, or the Force unearthing long-buried visions. He remembered standing here as a boy, small, hopeful, full of questions. Back when his mother's arms could still protect him. Back before prophecies and saber wounds, before lava seared his body and fate twisted his soul. A gust rose suddenly, carrying with it the screams of metal, pod engines colliding, sparks flaring into the air. But there were no engines here, No race, just the wind. And yet, Anakin clutched his side as if struck, as if a sharp corner from the past had torn into him anew. He fell to his knees, the sand swallowing his hands, his breath shallow. Something deep inside cracked. The Force trembled around him, not with power, but with pain. Through the storm of memory, a figure approached. Not Maul, not Obi-Wan, a child, small, thin, wide-eyed, a mirror from the past, wearing ragged clothes and innocence. The boy held out a hand, silent, unspeaking. His eyes asked what Anakin had stopped asking long ago. Why did you leave us behind? A sob tried to escape, but Anakin crushed it beneath years of hardened resolve. He stood, taller than the memory child, yet somehow more fragile. I didn't know, he whispered into the wind. I didn't understand. The boy said nothing. He simply turned and walked into the fading sunlight, vanishing, and the suns, once warm and golden, dimmed behind a veil of sand and sorrow. Elsewhere, beyond the vision's grip, Anakin's body lay cold in meditation, seated within a Spartan chamber carved into stone. Maul watched from the shadows, unreadable. He had seen this trance consume his apprentice more frequently as of late. Anakin's strength had grown in violence, but cracks ran beneath, and cracks, Maul knew, led to collapse or transformation. You wander the past too often, Maul muttered, stepping forward. The Jedi cling to memory. The Sith carve through it. Anakin's breath returned in a shudder. His eyes opened slowly, amber glinting in the low firelight. It wasn't a memory, he murmured. It was a warning. Then heed it, Maul said with narrowed eyes, and do not let it control you. But the warning Anakin feared was already too late. The Force around him felt altered. Not darker, not lighter, just older, heavier. Something was building, stirred by buried truths and childhood regrets. The galaxy was shifting again, and while their blades would shape the future, it was the shadows of the past that still chained him. He stood and turned from the chamber, leaving behind the ashes of his vision. Outside, dawn broke through jagged clouds, ashen, uncertain. He could not run from what he was. But maybe, just maybe, he could become what he needed to be. And so, with memories smoldering behind him, Anakin moved forward. The echoes of the past had stirred the present, but as Anakin stepped into the corridors of war and ambition, a darker truth awaited. The eyes of the Empire were always watching, and the Inquisitors had begun their hunt. A storm brewed above, bleeding into the night sky like a wound. The moon, swollen and red, cast its baleful glow across the jagged terrain below. Cracked stone and volcanic glass crunched beneath booted feet as two figures stood motionless, statues at the edge of something vast and irreversible. The air trembled with a tension more ancient than either of them. Maul's breath came low and steady, his eyes narrowed, predator-like. Across from him, Anakin stood silent, unreadable, though the Force around him pulsed with heat, agitated, conflicted, barely restrained. You hesitate, Maul said at last, his voice as sharp as obsidian. Again. Anakin's fingers tightened around the hilt at his side. I think. That's your weakness, Maul snarled. Thinking is for the dying. The living act. Their sabers hissed to life in tandem, one scarlet, flickering with hatred, the other unstable, burning in defiance. The sound of their ignitions split the night. Their glow lit up the canyon walls, painting ancient rock with red firelight. As their blades met, the crackle of energy filled the void, each strike flinging sparks like molten shards into the air. "You still believe order can be restored," Maul spat, each word punctuated by a strike. "You still cling to the idea that peace can be forced into existence." Anakin ducked beneath the next blow, his voice tight with fury. "And you believe vengeance is purpose? That every wrong is a wound you must reopen?" Their sabers locked again, steel grinding, heat hissing. The wind howled around them, as if the planet itself recoiled from their fury. Maul pushed forward, feral. "Palpatine took everything from both of us. We were his tools, his failures. The only answer is fire." Anakin's eyes flared. "No, he broke the galaxy, but fire alone won't fix it. If we destroy everything, we become him." Maul's face twisted into a snarl. "And what are we now, if not already too far gone?" Silence cracked between them. Their blades hovered inches apart, buzzing with latent death. The blood moon bathed them both in its mournful glow. Warriors shaped by trauma, bound by shadow, divided by vision. Around them, the ruined canyon stretched out like a scar. Forgotten battlefield, grave of ideals. It had been their meeting place, their training ground, their confessional. But now, beneath the dying moon, it had become a crucible. "You see in me what you fear in yourself," Maul said, lowering his blade slightly. "You walk the edge of the abyss, and still hope not to fall." Anakin exhaled, slow. His saber dimmed. "Maybe I already have." Maul stepped back, studying him. "Then why are you still fighting me?" "Because we are not the same," Anakin said, "and because someone has to be ready when he falls." It was not surrender, nor was it defiance. It was clarity. Maul recognized it with a grudging nod. Their philosophies diverged like a fork in a battlefield, both scarred by the same war, but choosing different paths forward. Without another word, Maul turned, retreating into shadow. The confrontation had ended not in blood, but in something sharper: disillusionment. The bond they had forged was fraying, not from betrayal, but from incompatible truths. Anakin watched the red tattoos fade into darkness. Then he looked to the moon, now half swallowed by cloud, and sheathed his blade. Their conflict had left no victor, only fracture. And beyond the canyon's edge, ships were moving. Something vast was coming. Across the outer rim, word spread of new unrest. Not rebellion, not yet, but stirrings. Small cells, silent signals, echoes of resistance. Anakin would need to choose soon, whether to follow Maul's path of vengeance or carve one of his own. But before destiny called again, one final thread remained, an old face from the Jedi past, returning not with judgment, but with warning. Smoke lingered like breathless ghosts above the horizon of Rathar Junction, a dead moon scorched by forgotten wars and left to decay in orbit around a dying star. The surface was a canvas of cracked shale and ancient wreckage, the remnants of battles that had written themselves into the planet's skin. Yet now, a new chapter was forming, one as volatile as the fuel cells humming quietly beneath the land. Above, the stars were blotted out by ships, dozens, maybe hundreds, arranged in a careful, reverent stillness. Rebel blockade runners, Imperial destroyers, and vessels bearing the faded insignia of Crimson Dawn hovered in delicate formation, like predators watching each other from the edge of a single kill. Their weapon systems remained silent, but silence, here, was not peace. It was the breath before a scream. Anakin stood aboard the Scourged Hand, flanked by Maul and a trio of shadow-cloaked operatives. Through the transparent viewport, he studied the ghostly parade of lights outside. "We brought too many enemies to one place," he muttered. Maul didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes were already fixed on the landing zone below, where envoys would soon gather, each one holding daggers behind their backs. The descent was unceremonious. One by one, figures emerged from different craft. Hooded rebels cloaked in dusty robes, Imperial envoys armored in obsidian plasteel, and syndicate commanders wearing neural dampeners and encrypted badges. They converged beneath the shadow of a shattered Republic dropship, its rusted frame turned into a makeshift negotiation hall. The wind howled through holes in the hull like a warning whispered by the dead. A hollow table buzzed to life, casting pale blue light onto grim faces. Anakin stood across from a scarred Bothan rebel, a silent inquisitor from the Imperial fleet, and a stoic Faline agent of the Black Sun. Tensions crackled like electricity between the gaps. "This moon is neutral," Maul declared, breaking the silence. "If there is to be war, let it be decided by what happens here." "And if there is to be peace?" asked the Bothan, voice dry as bone. Maul's smirk was unreadable. "Then may the galaxy tremble for what comes next." Discussions began, terse, clipped, veiled in layers of implication. The rebels sought freedom of passage through outer sectors. The Imperials demanded unconditional surrender of all Sith-aligned warbands. Crimson Dawn asked for nothing, but their silence weighed heavier than any request. Throughout it all, Anakin remained a quiet force, watching, calculating. The man who had once burned beneath Mustafar's wrath now stood where allegiances bent like reeds in the wind. His power was known to all present, feared by some, envied by others. None dared provoke him directly, but their eyes betrayed their unease. When talks broke for a pause, Anakin stepped outside the wreckage. He gazed at the horizon, where a storm rolled silently across the plains, sand caught in magnetic currents, swirling like the Force itself. He remembered the twin suns of Tatooine then, and the whisper of choices made long ago. Maul approached, voice low. "They do not want alliance. They want survival." "And survival leads to desperation," Anakin replied. "Desperation leads to chaos." Maul nodded. "Chaos leads to clarity, eventually." Their eyes lifted as a subtle hum echoed above. Reinforcements. Not for attack, but for message. Every faction had brought more than soldiers. They had brought witness. Because Ratha Junction was no longer a forgotten rock. It was now a fulcrum. As the final session of negotiations resumed, a flicker of something unseen stirred in the Force. Old energies, hidden watchers. Not all players had revealed themselves. Not yet. And far away in a tower of obsidian deep within the heart of the Imperial core, the Emperor listened. He had felt the gathering, the convergence, the ripple of a possibility unaccounted for. Palpatine smiled. The next move was his.